I'm Christine Hilgert, Senior Vice President here at Meeting Expectations. And before we get started, I'd like to let everyone know this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available in the next few days on our website. During the webinar, all attendees will be muted, but we do invite you and encourage you to send in questions. I ask that you enter your questions in the Q&A box on the webinar panel, and we'll address those towards the end. And now I'd like to introduce you to our panelists and tell them a little bit about themselves. We'll start with you, Alisa.
Hi, good morning. I'm Alisa Archer. I am a Senior Conference Manager here at Meeting Expectations. I've been in the meeting and event industry for about 10 years. My main focus at ME is project management for corporate clients and franchise groups. And as a lot of us did in 2020, I got a lot of experience with pivoting to virtual events and working with clients and colleagues and partners to deliver engaging and memorable experiences in a digital format. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of what we've learned.
Thank you. And Ruben.
Thanks, Christine. Great to be here. My name is Ruben. Hello, everybody. I'm Managing Director of Business Games Ireland. I'm based in Ireland myself, saying hello from Dublin. At Business Games, we create experiential learning activities for big and small groups, both offline and online, in order to bring learning in an interesting and engaging way to the corporate world.
Wonderful. And again, I'm Christine Hilgert, Senior Vice President here at Meeting Expectations. I work with a lot of our clients on coming up with some ideas and solutions to enhance their event, whether that's virtual, in person, and of course now our newest word, hybrid. So Ruben, I'm going to give this first question over to you. Tell me why game-based learning? What is that? Define that for us.
It's a very good question, Christine. It's where everything starts. So there's a lot of different ways of learning, right? We've all been to school and then you listen to a teacher. We've all been at events where there's an expert and the expert talks to you and you're just taking that in. Sometimes we get to just exchange with peers, right? And it's like around the table discussion. But one key form of learning that is missed out on often is learn by doing, or it's experiential learning, as we would call it. And it's a pity it gets left out, because if you think about yourself day to day, how do we learn as adults? We learn by having small experiences. We get direct feedback. We take that into the next day and we learn things differently. We don't sit down to study long courses anymore. So we really learn by doing. Then the big challenge is learn by doing is not that easy to realize. Like, let's say there's on-the-job learning, and when you do on-the-job learning, yeah, you're literally learning through the different experiences, but it's very risky, right? Because if you make a mistake and that mistake is tied to a real project or a real client, then you might have consequences that you want to avoid. So what we do is we create activities or moments where people can learn by doing, learn through experiences, by going through a different situation with certain people, like a simulation, where they can feel the same type of feedback and learning as they would have in day-to-day life, but it's in a safe environment. And that's where the game comes in. A game is a very good context, a very easy context to be immersed, to feel like you're in a real situation. The game can have rules, it can have consequences. So it's a very good metaphor, and it's a very good way to bring that experiential learning very practically to you in a safe environment.
I love it. And I love everything I've seen come from Business Games, but can you tell me a little bit more, a deeper dive of what type of those engagements do you put some focus on, like general high-level areas?
Yeah, but there's a lot of different briefings we get, right? And it varies. It always starts with, you want to change something. Now that could be, you want to change the level of understanding of a certain process, right? People are not familiar to a process. We want to change that process. But instead of just teaching people a process, you might want to change some behavior. It could be about having people do less of a certain type of behavior they typically do. It could be about having people do more of a certain type of behavior, or it could be about showing to people and having them try out some behavior that they weren't aware of they could do. Now, after processes or factual information to behavior, it could also go to values or purpose. because those are things that we hang on the wall and we have posters and we all know what the values of the company are. But sometimes it's difficult to understand what do we really mean by that, and in which situations should we act in a certain way because of our values. So to translate values to a more profound understanding, that's also something that we grab often as a briefing, and we try to help it.
I love that. So you really take some of the core values, if it's an internal sales meeting, and help bridge that opportunity. And if it's a user group, maybe like you said, it's a learning opportunity. And I love how you said about the teachers. I think we're all teachers when we become adults, maybe even as kids. But as adults, I think we do learn so much from our experience that we can be a part of the conversation in some of these sessions versus just going from that PowerPoint driven content sometimes. And I think a lot of people walk away with good values. So I love what you guys are doing, and I love working with you all on these different things. What does a typical audience engagement activity look like? An estimate amount of time someone should consider, or how should they start that initial approach of the brief? And we'll go to Alisa of how she did that with you.
Yeah, Alisa has a lot of experience with bringing us a lot of different types of groups, right? Because it depends on what is the occasion, why people gather, why they brought together in the first place, who is going to be there, what's the audience, and then what do we want to convey, right? If we have a senior team where we want to, pick their brains on what can we do more with values, that's a very different briefing from a sales team that we really want to teach in certain soft skills, from negotiating to client understanding to asking the right questions. That's very practical. Those are very practical skills that we might want to convey. So I would say that a typical activity is about 2 hours. In 2 hours, we have time to set everything up, create that context, create that story, have people slowly go into that new world. Very careful to keep a good balance between having a good story people can get lost in, but it's never silly, right? We're never going to ask people to do something where they feel like, this is no longer professional. And then as the story develops, we kind of trick them into different situations, and that could be team-based. And when you have different teams could interact, and there could be different roles that they have to divide and conquer. And then as the activity progresses, people are, or different teams, they're facing certain challenges. They have to deal with that. How do they do that? We typically live facilitate our events. We have live facilitators that might bring in some unexpected things that people have to deal with, and then that unfolds over a couple of stages as the game comes to an end. So 2 hours is about a good setup, and even in an online environment, because we used to do everything offline, even in an online environment, we managed to get the level of energy and engagement that demands for a 2 hour session. Some people are afraid of getting Zoom fatigue, but we say that it really just depends on what you do in that Zoom to avoid your fatigue.
Absolutely. And I know we've worked on a couple different projects. One of our earlier projects, the client challenge was, well, we've got 30 minutes and we need a new sales team to really understand where we're going and how they view us as a company. Can you just give us a little tidbit of what you did on that event? Because that was, I think, the challenge we faced. We didn't have the 2 hours, and you came with some great solutions.
Yeah, and I think for us, it always starts with who is there, what do you want to do? We have clear constraints now, and what do we want to bring forward? Here, we wanted people to be inspired by what was possible, and then we wanted people to have a practical experience. And very quickly, we end up with the question, well, which tools are we going to use? And tools, there's a lot of digital tools out there that we can use, and we need to find the balance between them being user-friendly enough, so we don't create extra friction. All of that we don't need. We don't need to make it more difficult, but we do want to enable people to have experiences and communicate and collaborate in ways that are, in their minds, perhaps not straightforward. So we brought in 1 or 2 very simple tools. It was a collaborative whiteboard. We bring in a story. There's always a story. People found themselves dropped in the beginning of the story. They were challenged very quickly with some inspirational, things that kind of tickle the the sense of wonder and set them up for what was going to come. And then we gave them a clear challenge, and then they were guided through quite a defined process, right? There wasn't a lot of leeway for them to get lost in. And then in a very scheduled thing, a very scheduled program over the course of the 25 minutes, they were able to come back having produced something, having put their own input, having been followed the process. And at the end, when they did their pitches, they could not help but look back and realize, oh, we now know this process because we've just been through. And every one of the people that you would have asked what was important of today and what was the process you followed, they would be able to tell that back to you, because it's like glue in your mind. When it's linked to a story, you remember what happened there. So I think that was the power of that very short but then still effective session.
And what I loved about that, it wasn't, I know a word we hear a lot is team building, but your approach is in a very serious manner. You really are taking the opportunities that we're trying to articulate, add to that story, as you said, and have a great journey. And in that situation, it was wonderful to see the report back on that and how that engagement happened. I think that's a key factor I've learned from you is it's about how they interpret it and how they report back. And with that, we're going to rotate over to Alisa, because she did a fantastic job of a very large virtual event back in May. And give us a little bit of backstory on that, Alisa.
Yeah, sure. So back in May, we partnered with Business Games to help with our client Landis & Gear for their annual exchange event, which is usually about 600 or 700 people in person. And their goal was to get about 1,000 attendees. And the main thing to notice when we started this process with Landis & Gear is really identifying who their audience was. And in this case, their audience was utility customers, and they ranged from metering engineers and system support on utility grids, from large metropolitan areas all the way to the small rural communities all over the globe. So we're really having a large group of diverse people trying to all come together and meet in this annual conference virtually. So our challenge was trying to define what an activity would look like for these attendees, and having them come together and network and share ideas and really help them connect as a group when they weren't seeing each other in person. And I'm going to share a little bit. Let me share my screen really quick.
And I know you're going to share some stuff to kind of show that story, how we got there and how Ruben's team came in and gave some great assessments. I was part of that journey along the way. What I really loved is how it evolved, and there were new things added in, and how you guys approached that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, once we worked with the client to kind of define what our attendance was, we worked with them to kind of help go through what their connection activity goals were. I think initially when they started this process, I think it's really hard for some clients to get out of the mind of their in-person event and how to translate that into a virtual experience. I think in the past, I think a lot of people see these networking activities as going into a ballroom and having a reception and having tables where people can float from conversation to conversation based on certain, knowledge points or interest groups. And, I think the table talk concept is very popular in a lot of in-person events. And so originally, I think they were really looking for us to kind of take that and recreate that in a virtual format. And while you can do that, and there are a lot of great tools out there like Zoom, self-select breakouts and stuff to kind of help bring that in-person process virtually, we were able to partner with Business Games to really help even bring that to the next level. And with the help of Business Games, we kind of were able to really dig into what they wanted to accomplish for their event. So, their number one goal was a networking opportunity. They wanted an opportunity for attendees to come together at the end of their first day and network and get to know each other and hopefully recognize a few names that they had seen in the past, and also see that there were new people that were able to attend, because just being virtual, we had a lot more of a global audience. So that was one thing. We wanted it to be energizing, them to be excited about that, form new connections, breaking up being in a virtual meeting all day. I think, these days, there's been so many virtual meetings where you're just sitting at your computer all day. We wanted something that you're sitting at your computer, but it wasn't just listening to somebody speak, that you were able to interact and talk with others and really have that one-on-one connection or small group connection that you would have gotten in an in-person format as well. And then we also wanted to differentiate the event. We wanted people to remember it as this was the year that we did virtual and it was exciting. And these are the years that we've done in person as well. So just kind of helping to bring it as something special. So after we kind of defined those objectives, we worked with Ruben and Business Games and his team to help create a team trivia activity where and I'll let Ruben kind of get into how he developed Lanny, the chatbot, and the mascot, and kind of how his team developed the team trivia process. But it was a way for attendees to connect not only on a business standpoint and share ideas and challenges that they've had over the years and learn kind of how everybody was dealing with certain things in their own environment, but also break it up and have them share personal information and, favorite music and things happening in the world, and just kind of a great way to kind of bring everybody together to let them form those connections. So I actually am going to turn it over to Ruben to talk a little bit about the team trivia activity and Lanny, the chatbot, and how we incorporated that.
Yeah, thanks, Alisa. I remember the journey, and I think some of the people listening, they might recognize this. They're looking for something, right? And when people are looking for a business game, they know that what they're going to get is something that is fun and you learn something, right? So it's always the two. If not, it's pure team building, but here it's fun and learn something. But what exactly do we want to take out? That's sometimes difficult for people because they haven't been exposed to all of the different tools that can be used. So one of the first things we did together with Alisa and the team was to understand what is it really that you would want, and what does it mean? Well, we want something engaging. We want something where people connect. Okay, if people connect, what does that mean? That they learn about each other. All right. So do you want them to learn something personal? Is it more business-like? What element of that do we want to do? We want it energizing, but do we want them to energize and connect with as many individuals as possible, or smaller one? And we describe this process as deciding what are constraints that we have to work with. This is 1,000 people, we have an hour and a half, and that's the technology we use. And what are things that we can still play around with? And then our process is kind of to throw out some ideas and do a lot of small demos, expose the client to a lot of possibilities until, because based on their reaction, we can feel, oh, this sticks and that actually works and that doesn't work. So for example, one of the things we wanted here is we wanted a very personable approach, and we wanted something truly different, something that you wouldn't come across at a standard virtual event. That's why we chose to use the chatbot, Charlie the chatbots, and it's just web-based. So you get a link and you get to talk to Charlie. But Charlie is very conversational. He can have a real discussion with you. He can ask you questions depending on the answer. He can give you other information, right? And the good thing about Charlie is that we could use him at multiple points in time. So Charlie could pop up not just during the activity, but also ahead of the activity at the registration moment. And after the activity, there could be a follow-up. We could even use him to get feedback on other parts of the event. So now throughout the entire journey or the entire experience, there was a personal person kind of guiding you through, which you normally never really experience when you're one of 1,000 people attending a virtual event, right? You're someone dialing in. And then they wanted a lot of, the client wanted a lot of personal stuff, like how can we extract some information from people in order to expose it to others. So what we came up with was we created this team-based challenge whereby different teams had to compete together to complete certain challenges, to complete certain trivia activities, but all of the content that was used was not based on facts and figures. It was based on input from the audience, from the participants. So all of a sudden, this whole getting to know each other, who am I here with, who are the other people, we could deliver on that as well. And that entire process is quite important because it's very difficult when we ask people, what do you want? We know that people don't know what they want practically, right? And helping them dig through what it means and what yes and what no, that's a process that we've learned to that we've mastered. And then together with you guys, that's what we do with the client. And then with Landis and Gear specifically, we ended up with this trivia activity that actually was broader from the beginning of the whole virtual seminar. At the registration, the chatbot would say hello. It would ask some information. We called it Lanny, the Landis and Gear chatbot, so we can completely brand it. He would ask for input from information. He would be able to share updates, share some factual information about the conference as well. Then we had the activity where we had people connecting with peers in little groups, completing challenges provided by Lanny, live facilitated throughout. And then we were able to bring Lanny back in other elements like questionnaires and feedback surveys. And I think, Alisa, that's something we want to show as well, how we developed the entire journey.
Yes. And let me share my screen real quick. And one thing to add into that as well is that I think one of the main important parts of the success of this game was also the client buy-in and the amount of time and energy and information that they were able to provide up front to Ruben and team to really help build out this program to be successful for themselves and for their attendees. It did take some work to identify exactly what they wanted from their attendees, what questions they wanted to ask, what information they wanted to gain. And there were a lot of conversations that had to happen around that. And it did take time to do that, but the results of being able to put that time in were really, really beneficial in the end. Christine put up Landy. So Landy ended up being our convention mascot. It's just kind of a snapshot of what that attendee journey looked like for us. Prior to registration, we sent out an email to all attendees and it was like, hey, get to know Lanny. And it was a quiz that they got to type in all of that information that we wanted to gather from them on the front end. We had questions about where they were from, what they were looking forward to in exchange, how many times they've attended an exchange conference in the past, what their favorite quarantine music song was. So many cool questions that we were able to then take that information to be used for the activity later on. But it was really great to kind of tease the trivia activity as well as expose the attendees to Lanny.
And then, Alisa, did you feel like the audience was engaging with Lanny on that front end? I mean, this was a little different and unusual, but I know between you and Ruben, collecting that information, were the attendees very open to sharing?
Yes, I think we ended up having a really great participation level in there. I think it was like something like 60 or 70% of our registrants did go through and answer the questionnaire. I think the key with the questionnaire too was to keep it short. This was something that they could complete in 2 or 3 minutes to really just kind of get that information. And it also laid the base for that when they came and joined the trivia activity on day one, when they came in, they kind of already knew what some of the questions were. So they got to be able like, oh, I wonder, where I fell in this average, or so it kind of built a little bit of that excitement and something to look forward to when they got into their actual kickoff. Ruben? Anything else you want to put in about that email?
No, I think it's very true. It's by setting up that expectation, curiousness about what was going to happen. People were excited to come and see, and I think we had like a 99 completion rate of people that showed up for the activity that then stayed all the way till the end. Because when they stayed the first 5 minutes, they got the story, they understood what they're going to do here, what their goal was for an hour, and everyone was like, I want to see, what's happening next. And all of a sudden, we're at this medal ceremony where we have, where we're handing out the virtual medals or real ones for that matter to the winning team.
Yeah. So it was fun. It was kind of, we just kept Lanny a little bit on the forefront, on the outside the whole time. We got into the, know before you attend emails, and we, teased him again. And then day one, we had our general sessions and our breakouts, and Lanny conducted our post-session surveys through the conference push notifications on the platform. Lanny pushed out a link and said, hey, I want to know what you thought about this session. And so when they filled out their session surveys, they saw Lanny there as well. And he was, engaging them and asking them questions. And I think one thing I don't think we've mentioned is that Ruben's team is like the king of the memes. So all the memes that we have been seeing throughout, the last year, I feel like it's even exploded more than it was beforehand. They throw in the memes into their chatbot and stuff to really make things fun and exciting. And just instead of just clicking, 1 to 10 on a survey, it was just a really great way to get feedback on sessions, which I think was a way to, excite something that's normally boring, but then also tease in something that's going to be happening later on. So that I think was a great way to kind of keep him engaged throughout the process. And then that evening we did our kickoff. We did use Zoom as our platform for the activity. We had Ruben's team and meeting expectations all come together. We did a small training for Landis and Gear employees because we really wanted those Landis and Gear employees to have the kind of team captain status where they would be actually sharing their screens of the chatbot link and helping their teams go through the process. And then we randomly assigned. Zoom has that button where you randomly assign, and we had 6 to 7 team members per team, and they all got into their little groups and were able to really go through the process together. And as Ruben mentioned, I think because the teams were small and they were in there and they were engaged and talking with each other to answer these questions, they stayed. We didn't have people drop off and leave halfway through or stay for 5 minutes and leave. Of those people that were assigned, they were very engaged throughout the whole process. It was great to see, and we had such great feedback from it as well. Ruben, is there anything else you want to add as far as the actual activity goes?
Talking about Zoom and how we used it, I see there's a question as well where someone is asking if we have 100 people for an interactive group. It sounds like chaos, and I think it definitely could be. It's important to master the tools, and I think that's where meeting expectations and ourselves come into to be clear what the constraints are, and then work from there. So in this case, we knew that we had to use Zoom as a conference call tool. Then we will not add an extra game platform on top of that. Now we can have 1,000 people in Zoom, and if by the click of a button, we organize them into breakout rooms of 6, and everybody knows what they need to do with the 6 people once they're in their group. In our case, it was as simple as share a screen and visit a link in any browser. No need for a login, no other platform. You don't need to do any of that. You find yourself with 6 people, share your screen, and visit a link. You're in browser, you're talking to Charlie through that link, and you're good to go. At the end of the activity, when all the rooms are closed, you can have a huge amount of people again together. We did a medal ceremony, and we showcased some of the great submissions we had and all of that, so we could celebrate that. And by having that logistically very well organized, we can easily scale to large groups. So I think Lands and Gear was an example of that. It goes back to a question that was asked in the chat on large groups.
It was simple. Like you said, you guys, we tested, I know on the backside, weeks in advance and made some slight adjustments, work with the client team. But in the end, when you've got all these people, and there is, when you go into a face-to-face meeting, sometimes you may be landing and going, okay, now how do I get to where I need to go? And you're kind of reading that information very last minute. You made this very simple, like you said. They came together, there was a link, and then it just floated from there, and it became very natural.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think Ruben came into the whole process very adamant that groups needed to be less than 10. I mean, I think he knew, his team knew that if that initial group was more than that, the engagement wouldn't be there. The people would kind of fall off and not feel like they're participating and that sort of thing. So that's where the challenge came in, is when you have 1,000 participants, how do you make it feel like a big group activity, but then scale it down to be engaging? Because it was a big group activity in the beginning. When they all first came into that Zoom meeting, we were able to give them instructions as a group and, tee everything up as a group, and then just dividing into that smaller subset is where that engagement really happened. So I think that was important to recognize from the beginning.
And Ruben, when Alisa says, that size of that group, why is that important? What makes that number the magic number? Why do you guys pick that?
So if you choose for a group-based activity, we want to make sure that everyone who's in that group can participate. So that means that there needs then a couple of things need to be true. There need to be enough to do, right? If you ask a simple question and then 7 people, 8 people, 10 people need to debate it, well, there's just not enough to do. So you want to make sure that what we get people to do, there's enough roles and responsibilities in that group. But yourself, if you're in a conference call with more than 7, 8 people, then there needs to be conversation management, right? Typically, you have a facilitator or a host that helps you, or that makes sure that, oh, that person wanted to say something. Sorry, you're on mute, you're off mute. What we found is that a group of 5, 6, maximum 7 people, that's a group that can still completely self-organize. And it basically goes back to skills, right? We know how to converse in groups when we're offline, when we get together. And over the last year and a half, we're really developing new social skills. Even having a virtual coffee, right? We know how to have coffee with someone, but in the last year, we all had an awkward situation, or like, I'm not really sure how this goes because we're connecting virtually. So I think all of us are learning those social skills, and as we will keep evolving to learn them over time, we'll be able to just do more and more and more. And at this point in time, that sweet spot of 6 to 7 people can run with it, and people are okay to say, I'm not sure what to do. Somebody else says, oh, I put it in the chat. Let's go. So that's kind of the data points we've extracted so far.
We do have a quick question kind of around this. Was the initial welcome and instruction time on Zoom with the speaker view pinned like this presentation, or could the participants see everyone? So that initial time when they all came together.
Very, very good. I don't know who asked that question, but it's a very specific and it's a good question. We always start by teaching people gallery view, and we spend the moment to show them, this is where you click. Now you see everybody, and have you got the video, etc. A little wave. You could even do an icebreaker with everybody in video mode, right? Cover your camera when, and then you have a couple of questions. And then the moment we evolve into, okay, now we're going to teach you something, so now you need to pay attention, then only then we would temporarily pin the speaker so that people can follow. Now, before we send people off to do something, again, we go off that pin mode, and we can look at everyone. Everyone can see what happens, because people also want to react to other humans. So to visualize that is important. So we do both at the right point in time of that initial moment.
Excellent, thank you.
Kind of a fun thing that I did with a program back in January as well is we did a little bit of a different Zoom team building, but we put a challenge in one of the previous emails asking everybody to come to the activity with a fun Zoom background that reminisced of a mountain scene. And their teams got extra points for just showing up on camera and showing their Zoom background. And I think there's ways for that initial, gallery view, to get conversation started without actually having to host a conversation topic is just kind of having a little challenge like that to just, everybody knows that they were going to get extra points for putting up a cool Zoom background. So if you log in and you have a neat background, that automatically, organically starts the conversation as well. So that's
the idea.
Yeah.
And Alisa, I know you have a couple more slides to go through. I know that there's some information on the engagement, like what did that look like at the end? Because reporting's big. I think that we can come up with some really great ideas, but I think at the end of the day, we also, back to the clients, we have to be able to report back how that transpired. So I think you have a sample of that in your slides.
Yeah. Let's see. So overall, this event was extremely successful for Landis & Gyr. I think I mentioned back earlier that their normal in-person attendance was 600 or 700 people. We had 1,600 registrants for this conference. Going virtual really opened up an ability for them to reach across the globe and go into pockets that they hadn't normally been able to do with their in-person event. So, 137% increased attendance over 2019. I mean, that was a huge stat for them. And we were really excited to see that. As Ruben mentioned, of everybody that participated in Team Trivia, we had 100% stay on and go through the whole chatbot activity, which really shows how engaging that activity was and just how much really everybody really enjoyed that challenge. And then for the overall conference, of everybody registered, we had 73% log on and stay on throughout the conference, which from a lot of the virtual events that I've been a part of this past year is a really high attendance number, especially for a client who has mostly external customer attendees, and it's not mandatory. They don't have CEUs they have to earn. That 73% number was really impressive for us. And we're excited to see that. And I know that we've talked about kind of Lanny and how we've brought him through the whole process. And, we also wanted at the end of the event to give everybody a little bit of a takeaway. I mean, it's hard to give somebody a swag bag or, things of that nature in a virtual environment. But during the process, we asked everybody to put in their favorite quarantine song, and Ruben and team made an awesome Spotify playlist that we got to send out post-convention along with a wrap-up video to really, show everybody, look what you guys did this week. This is our, big connection. We hope that you listen to it, enjoy it, and, think about convention. And I think they're even going to be using that playlist, through their convention next year, as well as already talking about how to incorporate Lanny through their hybrid in-person events as well.
Which is a great segue. You set that up perfectly. Let's talk about that segue over into those in-person engagement and knowing you might still have an audience that's in the virtual aspect. Ruben, what does that approach look like for you? And how do you tailor anything different or do you stick with those processes you would do in either way?
It's a good question, because of course it's unsure what the future will bring. We're convinced that we're going to go back to a large amount of offline events. We're convinced that we're going to stay on with big remote events that previously wouldn't have happened, because companies have figured out they can easily connect people from everywhere in the world, sometimes at a more cost-efficient way. And we believe that we're going to see a lot more hybrid events as well, where we do something offline, but how do we loop in the people that connect remotely? And for us, the vision stays that something that is delivered remotely, hybrid or offline, should be equally engaging, right? We have to work towards no longer compromising when it comes to this type of event. We used to compromise and think, oh yeah, but it's online, so it doesn't work. But we want to switch that up. So for us, the process continues the same. Keep making sure we understand the different tools, keep understanding what are the real constraints, and also through conversation, keep challenging clients on what they think is a real constraint. But we can show them, well, actually, if we do this, then all of your objectives are met, but we can now do more, right? And so by keeping evolving in that direction, we hope to be able to deliver on any type of briefing that comes, regardless of what the percentage split might be in online and offline. Because I think it'd be imprudent to think that we're going to go back to one extreme.
And I do think that the game-based learning concept, again, it's not team building. It is taking content and really delivering it in a manner where everyone's getting an opportunity to share their experience, share their opportunities, and really walk away with feeling like they not only took the golden nugget, but they also gave one to someone else. So I think it's something that's going to stay with us. I think it's something we learned probably even more, and Alisa, you can answer this, and having done this in the virtual space a little bit more and a little bit differently, what do you see as that future?
I think that the success of the attendee engagement in virtual formats that we've had over the last year is really going to make us have to up our game for in-person events. I think the days of networking receptions and table talk tables aren't going to be enough anymore. I think that there is going to have to be an opportunity for learning and engagement and taking things outside of sitting in a session room and listening to a speaker speak. I think that there is going to have to be ways to incorporate this kind of attendee engagement in an in-person environment. And then also we're going to have the added challenge of how do we engage our hybrid or our virtual audience and our in-person audience in a hybrid space together, which I'm really excited about. I think that sounds like a really fun challenge that I think we're probably going to be dealing with a lot this year as things kind of start going back, but people are still wanting to have that virtual component. I think it's just going to have to, we're all going to be taking off our putting on our brainstorming caps and just working with partners like Business Games to just figure out how we can do both and really help attendees stay engaged and connect with each other on all levels, not just virtually.
Excellent. And again, if you have any questions, be sure to put it in the Q&A box or in the chat. We did have one come through the chat. I see, Ruben, you answered, and we'll answer it for the whole group. What's an average size for game-based learning activities?
So it might surprise people, but we can actually really pull things off with very large groups. So if you have 20 people, you can organize a game, but routinely we would have simultaneous 100 or 200 people up to 1,000 if need be. Of course, something's got to give. If you have a larger group, it might be, the format might turn out in a different way, but that's definitely possible. So it kind of depends on the briefing and the objectives. And if you have very specific soft skill behaviors you want to teach to a group in depth, we would recommend a smaller group so we can work more with them and give everyone more individual attention. But if you want to do something around networking, get to know each other, values, principles, then you can do something to put people in the right frame of mind with 1,000 people at the same time.
Excellent. And another great question came through. Does the gaming platform integrate with other meeting platforms and mobile apps? I think you kind of answered that, but can you kind of re-explain that and make sure that?
Yeah. The short answer is yes, because there's no real gaming platform. We take care of the fact that we don't bring in extra constraints. So we typically start with what event management platform are you using? What apps are already in use that you're stuck with for reasons, might be security, registration. So there might already be something there. And what we specialize in is to make sure that we use those tools to with those create the communication streams we need, the interaction we need, and deliver that. So if you tell us we work with WebEx or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, great, then that can be the conference call tool. And you have certain browser you use, great. So we don't bring in a platform. We always say we will never add any login or any extra login or extra registration to any platform beyond what you might already be asking your participants, because that creates extra friction. You said it earlier, Christine, simplicity is always very important, but in a remote environment where we're all learning those skills, that's even more key.
I wish I had a sound effect of cheers going off, because I think a lot of people can appreciate that. that not having yet another login is a key factor and definitely gets them engaged. So thank you both very much. And I don't see any other questions, but of course we're here to always help you and help answer those questions. And I want to thank both Alisa and Ruben for sharing their insights and experiences around this topic of game-based learning. Love that, and I really see a great future for it. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. As a reminder, this was recorded and we'll have this posted to our website in the next few days. And we look forward to sharing more knowledge with you in the future on other topics. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thanks so much, everyone.